Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today is day 10 of my 15 days of Python. We've been on this from day 1 to day 10. What an exciting journey it's been. Today we're going to be looking at strings. And we've talked a little bit about strings, but strings are a bit more complicated than you might know of. And it makes more sense to have a dedicated session on strings. Think about the number of things you could do with strings. For you, you might think it's just strings. What are we manipulating with strings? But when you talk about web scraping, you're working with strings, sentiment analysis, large language model, file handling, manipulating of report, a couple of things you could do with strings. And because of how important strings is, we're going to be looking at everything strings in today's session. What are we covering? We're going to be understanding and using strings. We'll be creating, indexing, slicing, and looking at the different methods you could use for strings. And also we'll be performing string operations. We'll concatenate strings. We will look at repetition, and we'll look at how to work around the length of strings. And also we'll be using various formatting techniques. We've done a bit of this, but I'll just explain some of the logic behind it and how we arrive at some of the things that we've done previously. And finally, just like we've been doing in all of our sessions, we're going to be doing practical examples with strings, and also you can try out an exercise of your own. And without much ado, let's get started into strings. An introduction to strings. You must have heard about this because when we started this course initially, I tried to explain some of the different data types we have, and I mentioned strings and also mentioned that you could have strings in double quote and you could have them in triple quote. You could also have strings in a single quote. Strings are sequences of characters enclosed in quotes. And whenever you're working with Python, you just see a character enclosed in a quote, just know that you're working with strings. They can be single quotes, double quotes, or triple quotes. Any of this would work when you're working with strings. However, single quote strings just what you have here, hello. Whether you're using the single quote or you're using the double quotes, you're going to have the same thing. So it's just a matter of preference. The double quotes, you could have world, and the triple quote string, so you could use triple quotes as well. It's just about the use cases. For triple quotes, it's mostly when you have much larger number of strings that you're working with, you use triple quote. And if you print any of this, it's going to just print your string for you. One thing you should know, however, is that strings are immutable. Just like tuples. Strings, once they are created, the characters of strings cannot be changed. However, you could do some modifications around your strings, but just have that at the back of your mind that strings are immutable. Strings operations. The first operation is concatenation of strings. This is just like a refresher because we've said some things around this. And if I have a variable that is going to combine two strings, I have the first hello and I have word. I can easily print greeting and it's going to bring out hello world. It's very simple to just do the initial concatenation of the string by just using the plus. The plus is because this is not an integer, this is not a float. It's not going to do any mathematical operation. It's just going to bring the two strings together. Another string operation is the repetition. This is not an integer, this is not a float, it's not operating, it's not doing mathematical operation. It's just going to use the multiplication symbol to duplicate or repeat the strings. In this case, I have times 3. If I have times 5, it's going to print more of the strings for me. And so I have hello times 3. I can have the first one, have the second, and also have the third. So the repetition is repeating strings using the times operator. The third is the length. With the length, I can find the length of a string using the len function. And this is also possible with a number of programming languages as well. And Python is no exception. You can look for the length of the strings, try to understand how many characters are within the string. Once I put the length, it counts the number of characters that I have within the string and gives me the count. Please take note that when you're using the len operator, that it also counts the spaces as a character. So what this does is to count every single character within the string. And in this case, because we have a space in between, it's going to classify the space as a character of its own. So just take note of that. Now, let's talk about string indexing. We've talked about indexing when working with tuples, dictionaries, indexing when working with lists, and you could also do indexing when you're working with text. Indexing is essentially trying to assess individual character using their index. I have an example here. I have my message will be using hello world. I could actually print the first index, which is the H. I could also take it in the reverse order. I could take it from the back and print the last letter, which is going to be the exclamation. So you could actually access the different characters within your string using the indexing. This is very, very powerful when you're trying to analyze large data, when you're trying to build your application, and when you're trying to have different conditions set within the project you're working on. It's very, very powerful that you are able to access the different character within a string. And we can also talk about slicing. Now we are talking about the indexing, because slicing, you don't just access an individual character within your string, you can actually access a range of characters in the string. Now, let's look at the example we have here. For the first one, we say print. The print, you have the first. This is the way you start, this is where you start, and the second element here is where you end your indexing. So it's going to print from the very first hello and gets to the last, the fifth index, which is the O. The second example here, what this is going to do is, it takes from the seventh, the seventh is the start, the seventh index, and is going to take it where it stops is to the end. And the third one starts from the very beginning up to the fifth index. And that is what is printed here. The fifth is, however, quite tricky, because what it does is you have the first two columns. What this is saying is start from the beginning, then up to the end, and you put a 2 to say this is the step I want to use. Do an increment of 2 at every point. So when you start from the very first, you take 2 steps, you take the second, you take 2 steps, and you take the third, you take 2 steps until you get to the end. You could increase it to 3 steps, you can increase it to 4. You could just play around this using indexes, and that is some of the examples when you're working with slicing, working around range of characters. And just like we have within data structures, in strings we have string methods. We have the upper and the lower. This is a very, very useful method that is used in strings, because you are able to convert strings to upper or lower cases depending on the use case you're working with. Here I have a message. We've been using the example hello world. I could just say I want to print all of the uppercase for hello world, which is something I could have here. I could also say I want the lowercase, and that is easily done using this method. Another method is the strip. What the strip does, it removes leading and trailing white spaces. When you want to get rid of white spaces from string, I remember a project that I worked with, it involved me reading a file from a report. And when the file from the report came in, I needed to clean up this report, you see. And to clean up the report, one of the very first thing to do is to remove white spaces, because white spaces could be treated as a character and they could complicate a lot of things you're doing if you're not careful with white spaces. So you could use the strip method to get rid of white spaces totally and entirely from your project when you're working with that. And to do that, I have an example here. I have a lot of white spaces, and these are what I call white spaces. I have another one here, these are all white spaces, and to remove the white spaces I just say strip, and when I do that using that method, it returns this. For a couple of projects you don't need to print it out, it's just for you to go on with your transformations and other things you want to do, and you can get that out. We also have the replace. When I started, I told you that strings were immutable, which is essentially true, because you cannot change the element of a string once they are created. However, you could replace a string, but you can't do any modification to an actual string in terms of modifying it, imputing something into the string. You could remove a string and replace with an entirely new string, which is really possible. With the replace method, you could replace a substring with another substring. And I have a case here where I have the hello world. I could easily say message.replace, I want to replace the word with Python. It's very possible you could do that, but in terms of the actual modification of your world, you really can't do that in Python because strings are immutable. Now let's look at another method of string called the split and the join. Split and join split a string into a list of substrings and join a list of strings into a single string. And you could split out a string and they become a list, and you could join them back and they become a single word again. So let's look at the example we have. In the example we have message hello world. We are able to split, and the moment we split this, we're able to have this into a list. We can go back again and say we want to join, and just join it by a space. So specify that we want to join it by a space, and once we do the join, by the time we join it, they become a single word. So you could use the split, put them into a list, or you could come back and say, oh, you know what? I want it to become a single word again. So this is a method you could use to modify and manipulate your strings. Formatted strings. You can format your strings, and I've been really playful with these all through the course because most of the printings that we've been doing at the final end of our practicals, and we've been doing some modifications with formatting of strings. But now I'm just going to explain how all of this works, because the formatted string literals, it helps to embed expressions inside string literals. Look at the example I have. I have a name Alice, and I have the age as 25. In greeting, I use the F, which is formatting strings literals. I can specify the first string, hello. I put this curly bracket, and the curly bracket I can put the name and say I put the age, and you are this years old. This is one way I could use the formatted string literals to actually format my strings, and I could use it to apply different variables that I have into a string, and everything comes out perfectly. And you could do this on a much larger scale that you need to automate a lot of processes, which I've told you. One of the usefulness of Python is the ability to iterate over and help with automation of different tasks and different systems. Now, let's look at another formatting of string. We use placeholder and the format method for formatting. You could actually say, you know what, you don't want to use the formatted string literals, you just want to use the format method. You could actually use the format method to put it. The same example we have, hello, you just put a curly bracket, you are put the second curly bracket, and in the end you now specify the variables you want to fill into all of these curly brackets that you have, and that works so perfectly. And you have your hello Alice, you are 25 years old. This also works. The last one is you could use the string formatting of percentage formatting. We use percentage operator for formatting, and the way this works is I have here my percentage of string, and the percentage D is for integers. So here the percentage S expects a string and the percentage D expects an integer, and at the end you just specify the first and you also specify the second, and that is how you can do that using the percentage formatting. Of course, we can now go into a practical. We've done a lot of talking here. In this example, we're going to build a palindrome checker. A palindrome is actually a word that spells the same forward or backwards. Think of words like madam. If you're spelling a madam from the front or you're spelling it from the back, it's still the same. Now we're going to be creating a checker to check for palindrome. Is this word a palindrome? If it's not, it's going to tell you the word is not. If it is, it's going to tell you the word is. And to do that, we're going to go to our environment. Here, I've gone ahead to create my day10, and in the day10, I've created a Python file called the example1. And let me call this, just give it a title, palindrome checker. We've done something on functions, and from now on, we'll be using functions more frequently than not, just to help you get familiar with it as well. I'll be defining a function to check my palindrome, and I'm going to call it palindrome. Is this a palindrome? And I'm going to be taking a string. Just provide me the string and I'm going to check if it is. Put in your column. S will be equal to the string first. I want to take, because I'm not sure the case you're going to provide a string, but I'm just going to put everything into a lowercase. And when I put that into a lowercase, I'm going to remove all of the spaces in between the string and just make everything a single word. So I'm going to remove any space in between the words. When I'm done, I will return the string. It should be the same when I take it back, when I read it end to end starting from the back. So let's try. The word here, I'm just going to allow the user to input, and I'll say enter a word phrase. I'm going to allow the user to do an input, and I'm just going to say enter a word or phrase. A condition, if it's palindrome, if the word you've entered is palindrome, print. Now we're going to be doing our formatting. Sorry, I forgot my colon here. Just put that. Otherwise, print word is not palindrome. Word is not palindrome. Let's do a test on this and see. I'm going to run this. Okay, I need a space here. Because I need a space here, I'm just going to add a space here on where the user is doing the input. And let me do it this way, yeah. So I'm going to stop this and run it again. Okay, let me input a word and just call it people. People is not palindrome. Of course it's not. So let's put a word that is palindrome and see. Let me say nurses, run. Notice run is palindrome. I try another one. I could say madam. It tells me madam is palindrome. Let's do the second example. In the second example, we'll be creating a word counter. We'll be taking the count of words when we input the word. Let's go back to the environment. I've gone on to create an example 2 file that I'll be using for this. And I'm going to give this a title here, call it word count. So let's create our function, and the function is going to be called word count. It's going to be the words that you've provided. I'm going to split those words, and when I successfully split the words, I'm simply going to take the length of the word. Then I'm going to return the length of the words. All right, so let's take the sentence input from the user. I want to input a sentence. When you enter a sentence, I'm going to print that out. So when you enter the sentence, what I'm going to do is to print it out. I'm going to print out the sentence to say number of words, there's a string, and this is where I call my function. This is the function I've defined here. And what the function is doing is you enter the word, it does a split of the word, and doing the split is to enable us to take the length of the words. And when we are done, we take the length of everything. And let's go. And I'm going to say subscribe to my channel. And when I do that, I click on enter, and it tells me that the number of words I have is 4. I have just 4 words here. Mind you, this is not taking the count or the length of the character. It's taking the length of words, doing the count of the number of words I have. In just 4 words, I'm able to tell you to subscribe to my channel. Hope you do. Now to your exercise. In your exercise, you're going to be doing something amazing for us. You will write a Python script that takes a string from the user and print the string in reverse order. We've talked about this before. You can take the string in reverse order and try that on your own. Even if you can't, just do something, and you could use mine as reference point as correction. And when you've done that, you see me in my environment. I'm just going to define a function. I give the function a name, and the function is going to take a parameter, which is the sentence. And when I do that, I'm going to return taking the sentence from the back. With that, it's going to bring it in reverse order. And all the things I've been doing ever since is just to tell the user to input the sentence, and we'll print it out. And here I have that. I tell the user, enter the sentence, and when you're done, I'm going to just tell you what I'm doing essentially, and I call my function and print the sentence, similar to all we've been doing all the while. Again, I'm going to say, have you subscribed? And it takes it in reverse order. Well, this looks so ugly, but essentially that is how to do it. I'm going to give you an additional bonus. If you don't want to pull this into a function, you just want to write it straight up, this is how you can go about it. You could come here and just say sentence, allow the user to input the sentence, and you just do this to say reverse sentence is going to be the sentence provided. Just take it from the back, and when you're done, you print it out. So you could do it with function, you could do it without a function. And let me run this and just call it how is the learning so far, and it prints something else ugly, just taking it from the back. Well, that is it. I'm going to see you in my next video. I will be talking about something more exciting. Like and subscribe, share with everyone, and so that they can also have access to this information. I'm going to be seeing you. Thank you. Bye.